The room went quiet in a way that felt heavier than noise. A laugh had just floated up, light and careless, followed by a sentence that landed like a dropped glass on marble. She said he seemed great in bed, and for a single suspended heartbeat, every face turned toward him as if waiting for a punchline. What they got instead was stillness, the kind that comes before a truth breaks open. He didn't smile. He didn't blush. He simply breathed in, and in that breath was a life most of them would never see. Before the story pulls you deeper, pause for a second. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who carry more than they show, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. He was a single dad long before that sentence was thrown at him, long before strangers decided they understood him from the outside. His life had narrowed to school mornings that smelled like toast and toothpaste, evenings stitched together with homework and laundry, and nights when exhaustion pressed down so hard it felt like gravity doubled. He learned to move through the world carefully, conserving energy, avoiding rooms where expectations were loud. He had learned that people often saw the title before the person. Single dad meant something to them, a label that carried assumptions of failure, awkwardness, or need. He carried none of those stories. He carried his child. The gathering was meant to be harmless, a fundraiser hosted by a friend of a friend, one of those social obligations that came with polite smiles and carefully balanced plates. He almost didn't go. Babysitters were expensive, and guilt was louder than reason. But a neighbor insisted, saying he deserved a night out, saying it would be good for him. He arrived in a borrowed jacket that fit well enough, feeling like a guest in a world that moved faster than his own. People spoke in easy rhythms about travel plans, promotions, dinners that ran late. He nodded, smiled, and listened, practicing the art of being present without being revealed. The comment came from across a high table scattered with glasses. It was meant to be playful, a flirty spark thrown into the air. The woman didn't know him, not really. She had read confidence into his quiet, mystery into his restraint. When her words landed, they pulled the room into a single tight knot. Eyes widened. Someone chuckled. Someone else waited for him to laugh it off. The expectation was clear: deflect, flirt back, keep the evening light. What he felt instead was the familiar tug of two worlds colliding. In one world, he was allowed to be a man with desires, charm, and a past that included romance and mistakes. In the other, he was a father whose nights ended with lullabies and whose mornings began before dawn. The line between those worlds was thin and often unforgiving. He stood there with that line under his feet, and for once, he chose not to step aside. His answer didn't come out sharp or clever. It came out steady, like a hand placed on a shoulder. He said that being good in bed was not the skill that defined him, that the hardest nights he knew were spent awake beside a small bed, listening to a child breathe through fever. He said that the most intimate moments of his life were not about bodies but about trust, about being the person someone could lean on when the world felt too big. He said that he had learned patience the long way, that love had taught him endurance before it taught him pleasure. He said these things without drama, as facts shaped by time. The room changed. Not all at once, not neatly, but undeniably. The laughter drained away, replaced by something like respect, or maybe discomfort. Some people looked down at their hands. Others watched him as if seeing him for the first time. The woman who had spoken first blinked, her smile softening into something thoughtful. The moment stretched, then loosened, and conversation slowly resumed, quieter now, more careful. What they didn't see was the road that had led him there. Years earlier, his life had cracked open on a rainy afternoon in a hospital corridor that smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Promises had broken, plans had scattered, and suddenly he was standing alone with a responsibility that felt impossibly large. He remembered the first night home, the way silence pressed in after the baby finally slept, the way fear crept into every corner. He remembered telling himself he would figure it out, not because he was brave, but because there was no one else to do it. Money was tight in those early years. He learned to stretch meals, to fix what broke, to say no to things he wanted so he could say yes to what mattered. Sleep came in pieces. Friends drifted away, not out of cruelty, but because lives moved differently when anchored to different priorities. Dating became a concept he filed away, something for another version of himself that might exist someday. For now, love looked like scraped knees and packed lunches, like sitting on the floor building towers only to watch them fall. There were moments he nearly broke. Days when the weight of it all pressed so hard he had to sit down on the kitchen floor and breathe until the shaking passed. Nights when he worried about failing, about not being enough. In those moments, he learned to forgive himself for being human. He learned that strength was not loud, that resilience could be quiet and still hold firm. The comment at the fundraiser cracked open a door he had kept closed. It reminded him that the world would keep trying to define him in simple terms, and that he would have to keep choosing whether to accept those definitions. His answer that night wasn't meant to teach anyone a lesson. It was meant to protect something fragile inside him, a truth he had earned through years of showing up. After that evening, small changes followed. People who had once skimmed past him began to ask real questions. A few reached out later, saying they had gone home thinking about his words. One confessed they had never considered how many forms intimacy could take. The woman who had spoken first sent a message that wasn't an apology so much as an acknowledgement, a recognition that she had seen only a sliver of him. They met again, slowly, carefully, not as a punchline but as two adults carrying their own histories. At home, life continued in its steady rhythm. School projects sprawled across the table. Mornings were still rushed, but something inside him felt lighter, as if speaking his truth had shifted a long-held weight. He found himself more open, less guarded. He realized that he had been hiding not just from judgment, but from connection. He didn't need to advertise his story, but he didn't need to shrink it either. Time passed, as it does, marking days with small victories. His child grew taller, more independent, their laughter filling the rooms that once echoed with worry. He watched with a mixture of pride and awe, knowing that this, more than anything, was the measure of his life. Love had shaped him, worn him smooth in places and left scars in others, but it had made him deeper, kinder. When he thought back to that night, to the frozen room and the careless sentence, he felt no anger. He understood now that people speak from the limits of their experience. What mattered was that he had spoken from the center of his own. He had shown that dignity doesn't require permission, that respect can be claimed simply by telling the truth. As this story draws closer to its end, take a moment with it. If this journey has touched your heart, if it has reminded you that there are stories behind every quiet face, please engage with this video. Like it, share it, and let others feel this too. Just before we finish, here's a special request. Comment below with one word that describes what true strength means to you. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. In the end, the room thawed, life moved on, and he returned home to the place where he was always fully seen. He tucked his child into bed, listened to the soft rhythm of sleep, and felt a peace that no passing comment could shake. The world might freeze for a moment at a careless line, but it was warmth that lasted. It was kindness practiced daily, love proven in small acts, and the quiet courage of a single dad who knew exactly who he was.